Hello and welcome everybody to today's NFL Weekend Review.
We will recap every single NFL game in a rapid-fire manner. Hope you enjoy. Let's jump into our first game with the Detroit Lions at the Atlanta Falcons. This one was definitely a thriller. We can all agree on that. Just another way the Falcons find to choke a lead late. This one was crazy. But just overall for the Falcons, like I said, you're finding another way to lose. I mean, I think most hopes are lost on a playoff berth this season. They probably already were when they were 0-5, but I mean, this offense is definitely high-powered, and that won't change unless, of course, they trade away some big pieces. I don't expect them to trade, Matt Ryan or Julio, their veteran offensive stars. But at the same time, I won't be surprised if they did. They're definitely on the trading block, but I just don't think that they'll get an offer that will excite them enough to officially part ways with those guys. But just overall, the season's kind of a wash for the Falcons. But I mean, I guess you can do your best to just kind of maybe get some young guys involved and try to maybe show some promise for the future.
Overall, a good game for the Lions. I mean, what a thriller, dude. The Falcons, like you said, always find a way to lose. They lost by scoring a touchdown. Todd Gurley just looked like he kind of tripped and rolled into the end zone, which is not what he wanted to do. But so the Lions ended up winning 23-22 with that amazing, I'd say comeback and upset. There's really nothing much to say here. Matthew Stafford, 340 yards and a touchdown. Really no rushing. Adrian Peterson was their top rusher with only 29 yards. But Kenny Golladay had a few amazing catches in the game. He had 114 yards. Just a solid game for the Lions. The Lions are 3-3. That's not something I expected. And they look a lot better than everyone thought. They're still not an amazing team, but they're better than, some of the teams that some of us are supporting right now, which is kind of sad, but a good game for the Lions.
Yeah, I agree. And then, so for our next game, we have the Cleveland Browns at the Cincinnati Bengals. So for the Bengals, you always play bad against the Browns. That's just kind of how it always is. But this definitely, they played well against the Browns. It's just how the Browns played well against them. Baker historically is just super good against the Bengals. He 30% of his wins, I believe, are actually against the Bengals. But, Joe Burrow, once again, just showing promise, he's definitely their quarterback for the future. You still have, with they're missing Mixon, I think, which hurt. They were only able to get 37 yards out of Bernard. But their passing game was really clicking. Joe Burrow had over 400 yards passing with 3 touchdowns. The only problem is really against offense right now, because Joe Mixon can definitely be a franchise running back for you, is their O-line and pass protection and run blocking, because Joe Mixon is your running back for the future. You got your quarterback for the future in Joe Burrow, Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins are going to be there well into the future, most likely, once A.J. Green is gone. So overall, this offense is very powerful, and it can score a lot of points. I think if they get a good O-line, this team is going to be really, really dangerous in a couple of years.
Yeah, and before I move on to the Cleveland Browns stats, I want to point out something. Joe Burrow has been fumbling a lot, and that's most likely because of the offensive line. He fumbled 3 times, only lost 1, but Joe Burrow, he does not look like himself at LSU. He was confident, but now he just kind of lost his confidence, in my opinion. He's running around a lot because, with an offensive line like that, there's really nothing much you can do. But he's handling it well. He's playing well. He's not playing like everyone thought he would, in my opinion. I thought he was going to do better, but this is a great game for him, and I'd say a bounce-back game from his other games. But moving on to Cleveland, this isn't really that much of an impressive win. It's against a Bengals team, and he only won by a few points, but that's not to say that people had a bad game, because Baker Mayfield, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception, 297 yards, a great game from Baker. Kareem Hunt, 76 yards on the ground. But the main story from this game is definitely going to be Odell Beckham Jr., who got injured on a tackle from a Baker Mayfield interception. He is going to be out with an ACL tear, out for the rest of the season, which is not something you want to see from the Browns, because you're 5-2. You're looking to win a few more games. possibly get a playoff spot. But losing Odell like that's not going to be good. But receiving wise, Rashard Higgins was able to get 110 yards and just a tough game to watch for the Bengals just because of that Odell injury. But overall, a pretty good game, especially for Baker Mayfield, who had, I'd say, a bounce back game. But if he really wants to prove the haters wrong, he's going to have more games like this in the future.
Yeah, and on the topic of Joe Burrow, I think, I think he's definitely played to and possibly beyond people's expectations. He's one of the leading passers in the league right now in terms of yardage. Um, he's also been throwing touchdowns. He's obviously a rookie and he's gonna make mistakes like fumbles and interceptions and all that. Um, and obviously, like you said, running for his life doesn't help at all. So I think he's been great. I think he's definitely got quarterback for the future. I mean, obviously, the only negative is maybe just turnovers, but that comes as a rookie. It's hard when you to find a rookie that doesn't make many turnovers. So for our next game, we have the Green Bay Packers at the Houston Texans. So for the Packers, you're 5-1 now, and with the Bears' loss earlier tonight, you're back to first in your division and tied for the 1 seed in the NFC. I mean, this was just a great game for the offense. Obviously, scoring 35 points. A-Rod was great, 23 for 34, 283 yards, and 4 touchdowns, no picks. He didn't get sacked a single time. The running game without Aaron Jones played pretty well. Jamal Williams had over 4 yards per carry. And obviously with Aaron Jones, his offense probably would have scored even more points. Devontae Adams was back, and he had 196 yards and 2 touchdowns, 13 receptions on 16 targets. That just shows, how important he is. As soon as he comes back, he's immediately making an impact again. And then, of course, the defense did okay against the Texans. This is still Deshaun Watson, who's a great quarterback and this offense has scored a lot of points. They've only scored under 20 once in the season so far, and that was against a very stout Ravens defense. I think the Packers did a good job. So overall, this Packers team definitely looked like a fitting team to contend for that NFC title.
Um, for the Texans, Deshaun Watson is trying his best out here, especially without the weapons that he had on offense. DeAndre Hopkins before he was traded away, 309 yards, 2 touchdowns. So he's really out here trying to carry his team, but he's not really getting much help from anyone else. David Johnson, 42 yards rushing, no touchdowns. Actually, timeout. Let's edit this part out. But I thought he had different stats than that. Wait, let me look this up because I could have sworn he had a good. Because I was checking his fantasy score, and he had a good game.
It's because he had 9 points from receiving,
True. My bad.
and then an extra 4 from rushing, so 13 total.
Love how there's David Johnson and Duke Johnson. Great job.
So confusing, bro.
Bill O'Brien was like, "Hey, man, you want to have another D Johnson on the team? Let's bring in this guy, Duke."
The reason that Dave Johnson had a big game is because they were receiving touchdown.
Yeah, I didn't see that one. I was looking at Duke Johnson's stats for receiving. I hate this. Why do you have to do this to us Texans? Okay, I'll move on. Receiving wise, Randall Cobb had 95 yards. David Johnson had 1 touchdown. Will Fuller had 1 touchdown, who was my pick for sleeper, but he only had 35 yards. So I'd say an off game for Will Fuller this season. But it's a team that it's not a great Texans team. They were a better team before Bill O'Brien kind of shifted things around. But Deshaun Watson is trying his best out there, but it's pretty tough for him, especially without the weapons he needs. And before we move on, bro, look at this. Both David Johnson and Duke Johnson had a fumble.
No way.
Oh my god. Oh no.
But David Johnson's the one who lost a fumble.
Yeah, Duke Johnson's just a better player overall. He doesn't lose those fumbles.
100%. All right. For our next game, we have the Carolina Panthers at the New Orleans Saints. So the Saints are picking up a big win against a division rival. This was one of our games of emphasis. A thriller came down it was only a 3-point game. I think it might have been, Drew Brees, he's showing signs of regression. Obviously, he can't quite sling it as much as he used to, but he's still efficient. He's still completing. His completion percentage is still one of the best in the league. And you still have Alvin Kamara there, who, as we know, can do almost anything you ask him. And then a breakout game a little bit for Marquez Callaway, who had 8 receptions on 10 targets for 75 receiving yards, really stepping up in the absence of Michael Thomas. He might get traded. So if Michael Thomas gets traded, I don't know. Drew Brees might struggle, but he with Alvin Kamara is almost as good as a receiver as anybody. And then Drew Brees has made really elevated some of these uh, other receivers like Traquan Smith or Callaway, and Jared Cook had a good game with a touchdown. And so I think overall that Drew Brees isn't washed up just yet. He's still a great quarterback in my eyes, and he's still a quarterback that can lead his team to a playoff spot.
Moving on to the Panthers, Teddy Bridgewater, 254 yards, 2 touchdowns. Pretty good game for Teddy Bridgewater. Mike Davis, not a good game at all. He had 7 attempts for only 12 yards, his longest run being 7 yards, and he averaged 1.7 yards per carry. Not a good game for him at all. Mike Davis is looking pretty good earlier in the season, just not a game you want to see out of him, especially when the Panthers needed them the most, because this was a close game for them, and I think if the rest of the game was a little bit better, it could have been a lot closer, but receiving really carried him. DJ Moore, 93 yards. Robbie Anderson, 74 yards. Just not a stellar game. Rushing wise, not a terrible game for the Panthers, but not an amazing game either. There was one forced fumble, but that was pretty much it from the Panthers. Not a great game, not a bad game. It's a loss you don't want to see, but it looks like the Panthers are coming back down to earth after taking a few wins that a lot of people didn't think that they would have had. But a good win for the Saints, who really needed this win, but wasn't amazing.
Yeah, it's going to be a crowded NFC wildcard race with, that NFC that 4 seed most likely going to an NFC East team. Got a lot of good teams who are going to be vying for those 3 wildcard spots. You got like the right now currently the wildcard teams are the Bears, Cardinals, and Rams, and the Saints are sitting right outside of it, and then you got the Panthers and the 49ers, and also the Lions, who are kind of on the verge of making maybe a wildcard push. And then for our next game, we have the Buffalo Bills at the New York Jets, or as they're better known by, the New York Jokes. No offense, Jets fans. But they did not look like jokes this game. Their defense was good against a very high-powered Bills offense with, a guy who I think many people thought was a potential MVP candidate before he kind of had a couple games, in Josh Allen. And then also, they got Stephon Diggs and Devin Singletary. So their offense is great, but the Jets defense held them to 18 points, all of them coming from field goals. So this offense didn't score a single touchdown on the Jets. So that's good. That's good for the Jets to do that. The Jets scored more touchdowns than the Bills, if you can believe that. They had a couple rookies that played pretty well. LaMichael Perrine being one of them with a rushing touchdown. You also had Denzel Mims come in his first ever game and play really well and get 4 receptions for 42 yards. Overall, you're probably going to get a high pick this draft, and I think most people are expecting them to pick Trevor Lawrence if they get the number 1 overall pick. And I don't think that'd be too bad of a pick, but you can't expect a guy like this to solve all your problems. For example, they won the game, or they didn't win the game, but they almost won the game against not an elite Bills team, but a good Bills team. But you didn't move the ball too well. You only had 190 yards of total offense, which is so I just think there's definitely problems on this team, but there were some bright spots for this team in terms of looking at the future and beyond.
Moving on to the Bills, 307 yards for Josh Allen. No touchdowns, like he said. It was all field goals. Cole Beasley, 112 yards. 1 interception for Jerry Hughes, 1 interception for Jane Jackson. Let's talk about the kicking. Tyler Bass, 6 for 8 from field goal. His longest from 53. 18 points total for him. That's crazy. pretty sure, I don't remember the exact statistic, but it's the first time in a very long time that a team has won without scoring a touchdown, I believe, or won by this much. I'm sorry if I butchered the stat, but that's pretty crazy to win, especially with 18 points, pretty much only from field goals. So really impressive for the Bills there.
And for our next game, we have the Dallas Cowboys at the Washington Football Team. So, very tight, division right now. Obviously, any team has a shot in this division, with the leading team only having 2 wins in the Eagles. And for the football team, with this win, after having 5 straight losses after a convincing win in Week 1, you're right back in the race. Your 2 wins only coming from teams inside the division, but it's 2 wins is 2 wins. And this division, honestly, just almost any type of one could win in this division. They're currently uh the 2-1 in their division, and if they keep it up and end up going 4-2 in the division, all they really might have to do is just win one more game outside the division or to claim this division. So I think this football team is a legit threat to the division. I mean, honestly, all the teams are, because this is just so unpredictable. But I'd say that for me, I say the Eagles are my favorite to win this division, but right behind them would be the football team, because the football team did beat them in Week 1. And I do think that, with Antonio Gibson and Terry McLaurin, the 2 stud young guys running and receiving the ball, I think that this team could actually win this division. I mean, they won't be a very good team, but they might win the division.
Okay, moving on to the Dallas Cowboys. Cowboys fans, how's it feel saying you're gonna make the Super Bowl and now you're 2-5? I know you lost Dak, but you still were not gonna make the Super Bowl even with Dak at all. We could finally laugh at you guys for making yet another terrible prediction. Andy Dalton only 75 yards and an interception, and the backup 39 yards total. Zeke only had 49 yards. A horrible game for the Cowboys. Horrible. Only 3 points. You were blown out by the Washington football team. So just terrible overall. Greg Zerline, Greg the Leg, pretty much carried with one field goal. Pretty sad game for the Cowboys. It's really tough to watch.
Yeah, this team has been very disappointing this season. I mean, I think every team in the NFC East, you could say, has been disappointing, but especially the Cowboys. They always have hype going into the season, though. I personally expected them to. I didn't know if they were going to win or lose their division to the Eagles. I thought it'd be really close. I thought they'd both be around like 9-7 ish. I didn't think it was going to be a particularly strong division, but I think it was going to come down between one of the two of them. Um, Turns out that could be the same story. Might come down to still one of the two of them, but just not with the records I expected. Definitely very disappointing season for every team in the NFC East. And then for our final morning game, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Tennessee Titans. So, Titans. I feel like this game shouldn't have been as close as it was. First half, Derrick Henry was a non-factor, and overall, he wasn't too big a factor either. Only 75 yards rushing when we're used to him popping off for over 100. They only had 82 yards total rushing, which is their strength of their offense. But A.J. Brown was able to nag 153 yards receiving, which was the best on the team by far. The next closest was only 35. So Ryan Tannehill, he looked okay. He threw 2 touchdowns, no picks. He was meh. He didn't win the game, which is definitely the bummer. And I feel like this game definitely the Steelers. If only the Steelers didn't get a little unlucky with a couple interceptions. The Titans, they were able to get 2 picks off tipped balls. One bouncing right off his receiver's hands on a perfect throw from Big Ben. So overall, I just think that the Pittsburgh got a little unlucky with some turnovers. The Titans still weren't able to capitalize on those turnovers and weren't able to turn this game into a win. And they've had some questionable wins against some bad teams. They're only real if you don't count the Bills game, this team is not looking good right now. I think if a team is able to stop Derrick Henry, or if Derrick Henry is injured, this team is not that great. I think that if they didn't have Derrick Henry in some of their wins, they could very well be a 500 team right now. But they have Derrick Henry, so they're still an elite team in my mind. But they just gotta they've got to really turn it up, especially when they get into their divisional games against the Colts with the Ravens in between. That's gonna be the toughest stretch of their schedule. And if they can um, sweep the Colts or maybe even split it with them, I think they got the division under wraps. But for now, they just got to keep on. They got to bounce back and keep on doing what they were doing before they lost to the Steelers with Derrick Henry, especially.
Moving on to the Steelers. Ben Roethlisberger, 268 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. Like you said, some of those interceptions weren't his fault, but really not looking good on the interception wise. But it was a pretty good game for him. James Conner, 82 yards on the ground. Benny Snell Jr., 1 touchdown on the ground with 2 carries for 2 yards. Juju, 85 yards. Deontay Johnson, 80 yards and 2 touchdowns. Really the star of the game. But Juju, before the game, I said it was kind of disappointing because Juju hasn't had a game over 100 yards in a while, I believe. So to see him bounce back is pretty good. 85 yards. The defense looked pretty good. I mean, they did give up 24 points to this Titans team, but that's nothing to be sad about. The Titans are a really good team, and it's a good win for the Steelers. Good win overall, and the Steelers are looking like a really good team. I didn't think that they were that good because they didn't play any good teams, but after playing a solid Titans team, they're looking like a really good team.
Yeah, being the last undefeated team in the league, it got to feel good for Steelers fans. I was talking to a Steelers fan on the phone a little bit earlier. His thoughts on his team right now are basically just like he's feeling good. They're undefeated. He thinks that, the argument's there for best team in the NFL, but they just got to keep it up and keep on proving themselves. Because that's where they're going to be all season, especially against the Ravens upcoming. If they can beat the Ravens, that's going to really prove it. And then for our first afternoon game, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Oakland Raiders. So for the Raiders, I mean, I was joking with you. I said that this Raiders team is a definition of an average football team. That their quarterback is the definition of an average quarterback. And I think this game definitely showed that. They've had their up and downs this season. They've gone from beating a Saints team that many thought could potentially be, a Super Bowl contender, but then later on we've seen that they might not even be a wild card team. I do think they're still a good team. And they also beat the Chiefs, reigning Super Bowl champions, but they also lost to teams like the Patriots, who we have seen are not that great after some early season, the breakout. After breaking out earlier in the season, we've seen that the Patriots aren't that great of a team, though. And then they also lost, they also lost the game to the Bills that was not as close as the score made it indicate, and then they just got smoked by the Buccaneers. So I just think it's just like they're doing just enough to get by, I think, as like a potential wild card team. But at the same time, I don't know if it's actually going to happen for the Raiders. Derek Carr, he looked average because I think that's just what he is. The running game was bad, 76 yards only 3 yards per carry. Nelson Aguilar though looked good, but Henry Ruggs kind of quieted down after a big game. But just overall, I think the Raiders, they're just an average team. And if they want to prove me wrong, then they've got to not lose like this against the Buccaneers. I think if they come out, they got a big game against the Browns. They can win that. I think that definitely proved me wrong.
And tough loss to a good Buccaneers team. You don't really want to lose that much if you're the Raiders, but Buccaneers looking like a good team. I didn't really think they're going to be that stellar of a team this season. I don't think you did either. I don't know if you had very high views on them. I think I liked them a little bit more than you did, but a good game for them. Tom Brady, not looking like a system quarterback. I don't want to hear that anymore because Tom Brady, 369 yards and 4 touchdowns. He's looking like the GOAT. I don't care what anyone says. He's definitely up there in contention. You don't have to say he's a GOAT, but he's really looking like that right now. Leonard Fournette, 50 yards. Ronald Jones, 34 yards on the ground. Scott Miller, 109 yards. You said, I think it was last episode of the podcast, that he was a breakout player for the Buccaneers when we were talking about the Buccaneers receiving core was elite. And, I didn't really believe you at the time. I was kind of sleeping on him, but I really regret sleeping on him now because he had a great game. Chris Godwin, 88 yards and a touchdown. Gronk, past 2 games have been looking pretty good for Gronk. Gronk, 62 yards and the touchdown. Nowhere near what Gronk was in his prime in New England, but I don't think anyone really thought of that. Mike Evans only had 37 yards, but a great game for the Buccaneers overall. A few interceptions. Just a great game if you're a Buccaneers fan. The Buccaneers are looking like a really great team. I think they're locked for the playoffs at this point. They can definitely make a run.
Yep. And then for our next game, we have the Chiefs at the Broncos. So for the Broncos, this was, I mean, you had 4 fumbles. 2 of them you lost, and you also Drew lost through 2 picks with no touchdown passes. I mean, this team had more turnovers than touchdowns, which you do not want. I mean, it was just not good at all in this snow game. Their running game worked pretty well, though. Philip Lindsay had 79 yards on only 9 carries. And Melvin Gordon also looked pretty good. They rushed for a total of over 170 yards. And then they had a breakout game from the young rookie tight end who caught 7 of his 7 targets for 60 yards. But just overall, I think that this is a good Chiefs team that they lost to, but their just team is not yet a playoff team. I think they had the potential going into the season, but they're just not quite there yet. They got a couple more seasons.
And now the Chiefs, they're the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes, I'd say kind of an off game for him. Only 200 yards and 1 touchdown. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 46 yards and a touchdown on the ground. Le'Veon, his first action as a Chief, 39 yards. Mecole Hardman, 57 yards. Tyreek Hill with their one receiving touchdown. The defense played well. They got a few picks. They got a pair of picks, one by Daniel Sorensen and one by Tyrann Mathieu, the Honey Badger. Those forced fumbles, like you said, but kind of relied on Harrison Butker here. He had 13 points total, but I don't know why I'm saying relied. They had 43 points, but just a game that everyone expected the Chiefs to win. No one really expected the Broncos to contend. I mean, it's the Broncos, 2-4 Broncos versus the Chiefs, who are now 6-1. So, not a game anyone really saw the Broncos competing in.
Yeah, this Chiefs team is just too good for the Broncos. For our next game, we have the Niners at the Pats. So for the Patriots, beginning of the season, got off to a good start. Looked like a playoff team. Maybe could potentially contend in that division. We were talking about it. Even just last week, I said that they were still a good team and that made that division legit and had the argument for third best division in the league. And then they, put up 6 points against the 49ers, who were below 500 who were not above 500 for most of the season. The only wins they got in the early part of the season were against the 2 New York teams, but recently they've played a little bit better. But still, this is definitely disappointing. Not just that they lost, but that they lost by this much. Cam threw 3 picks and no touchdowns, had 98 yards. They ended up having Brendan Stidham. I mean, the running game only had 94 yards. It was not good for the Patriots. They're not looking like a playoff team whatsoever. Looking like the 3rd best team in that division at best. So I don't know what to say about them other than that. I think that they were a little bit too overhyped coming to this season. I think they'll either barely make the playoffs or barely miss it. I might have been overselling them there, and I think they'll probably miss it by a good amount now. But you never know. But yeah, just overall, just not a good game. To only put up 6 points, just against any team, you should not be putting up just 6 points if you want to have a chance at making the playoffs, which I think they did think they would. They want to make the playoffs going into this season. Just not a good game. 6 points. Come on.
Yeah, 6 points is not something you want to be doing. But the 49ers, Jimmy Garoppolo, 277 yards. He did not throw a touchdown, and he did throw 2 picks. So Jimmy G's not looking amazing right now. Rushing-wise, they had 4 touchdowns total, 3 for Jeffrey Wilson, 1 for Juicy Juice, getting the fullback in there. Brandon Ayuk, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I hope I am, 115 yards receiving. Debo, 65. The defense had 4 picks in total, actually. Jamar Taylor had 2 total. Fred Warner had 1. And Emmanuel Mosley had another. Just a good game for the 49ers overall. They're not looking like the 49ers we knew last season making the Super Bowl, but it's a 49ers team that's looking a lot better, especially with a lot of injuries. For example, Nick Bosa. But it's a good game for the 49ers, holding out until some of their best players come back.
Yeah, they could potentially definitely make a playoff push, but it is a crowded race for the wild card spots in the NFC. they do have some injuries. You got Quan Alexander who's questionable. You got Chico Guitar, Jimmy Ward, Jeff Wilson, and Jeff Wilson's question. You know, he might not play next week, and then obviously you got the guys on IR. So got Mostert. They got a lot of injuries right now, but they're still playing pretty well, so they could definitely play a push. And then for our final afternoon game, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Los Angeles Chargers. And for the Jaguars, you had one fluke win against the Colts, okay, and then really they should be 0-7 right now, in my opinion. They're going into a bye week, and they come out against the Texans at home. If you don't win that game, yeah, you might have the number 1 or 2 pick if you don't win that game. When I think a lot of people thought they honestly, I think after the Colts win, they were a little bit too overhyped. After that, I said because with no preseason, week 1 is always fluky. Especially with the Colts, who haven't won a single week 1 road game in over a decade. It's always fluky, especially with no preseason. Really, the first 4 weeks could be considered preseason. But I still think this team was looking like one of the worst teams in the league if they were expected to coming into the season. But just I just don't know. I mean, Gardner Minshew, he looks like he's good. He fills up the stat sheet. I got him on my fantasy team because he puts up 20-plus points a game in fantasy, but he doesn't win games. I mean, some of that's the fault of the defense. Obviously, 29 points is a good amount. But the defense definitely, their defense has allowed 30 points or more in every single game since the Colts game. So I think that defense might be the problem here. They shipped out a lot of talent on the defensive side of the football in the recent years. Offensively, I think they have it. I think they pretty much got it figured out for the future. Minshew can be good. James Robinson can be good. Chenault can be good. DJ Chark, he's good. They've got some good weapons on offense. I think it all depends on how Minshew develops and if he can develop into a great quarterback instead of just a good quarterback or even just really good. And then obviously you got to fix up that defense. Allowing 30-plus points in 6 straight games is not going to cut it.
Yeah, and excuse me if I get a little hyped here. Chargers bounce back. Justin Herbert, first win of his career. He's looking like a stud, man. No one expected him to come out and play like this because no one expected him to come out and play at all. He had 347 yards and 3 touchdowns. Play calling was strange in some parts. Easton Stick coming in, I think it was his first official NFL game. Didn't really do much, so questionable play calling there. Justin Herbert, 66 yards on the ground and a touchdown, longest run for the Chargers since I believe sometime in the 1980s because, Phillip Rivers did not have the legs. Keenan Allen, 125 yards. Jalen Guyton, 84 and a touchdown. Virgil Green had a touchdown, went down with a pretty gruesome injury. Defense played lights out in the first quarter, kind of got sauce in the second quarter, but then played well afterwards. Badgley missed a field goal and an extra point, so we don't know what's going on with Money Badger right now, but not looking too amazing. But the team is looking pretty good right now. I mean, they're 2-4, but they can bounce back if Justin Herbert keep playing well. It's just that the injuries are haunting them, just like a lot of other teams in the league right now. Just a great game overall for them, winning by 10. I mean, obviously, you don't want to get 29 points scored on you by the Jacksonville Jaguars, but a win is a win.
Yeah, I mean, I don't personally see this team making the playoffs, but you got a good stretch of winnable games coming up. Towards the end of your season, most of your tough games are out of the way. You already got the Chiefs, Panthers, Buccaneers, Saints out of the way early. But you got a bunch of winnable games coming up, and they could make a playoff push. I don't think they will, but they could. Yeah. For Sunday night game, we have there's a thriller in which it was a really fun game. A thriller in Arizona. Went down to overtime. The last final seconds of overtime, where the Cardinals won and after they iced their own kicker. But they got the win. But for the Seahawks, Russell Wilson, 3 picks is not great, and he was bailed out with pick 6 by DK Metcalf for that tremendous rundown. I mean, he threw for a ton of yards, 388, and he also threw for 3 touchdowns again. He threw it 50 times, though, which I think when throwing it 50 times, you have to expect him to throw at least one pick. But with Russell Wilson, who is one of the best quarterbacks in the league, I do think he should not be throwing 3 picks, one of them almost being a pick 6. Um, the running game was good, though, 200 yards rushing total for the team. They were able to move the ball. They were able to score everything. They just got outplayed by the Cardinals, and I think Russell Wilson set up his defense in some bad positions with some costly picks that allowed the Cardinals to capitalize. The defense did get out of some rough spots, though. They forced the Cardinals to only a field goal on that one almost picks after that one almost pick 6. But I mean, overall, I think that they just Russell Wilson set him up with some bad situations. They did not get to the quarterback though. They didn't sack him at all, but with Kyler Murray, that's pretty hard. But still, yeah, I think you definitely gotta get to the quarterback more at least one time. And then Tyler Lockett obviously had a huge game. I believe setting the record for most fantasy points in PPR scoring of all time. I'm pretty sure they set that record. But yeah, I mean, I think it's disappointing that they lost this game, considering that they consider themselves Super Bowl contender in the Seahawks. But they still looked good. I think they're just like I think that Russell Wilson played a little bit off, like I said, with the 3 picks and setting up his defense in bad positions.
Yeah, and an amazing win for the Cardinals here. Bounce back after a kind of like rough spot earlier in the season. Kyler Murray looking like an MVP candidate right now. 360 yards and 3 touchdowns. He had 67 yards on the ground and a touchdown on the ground. DeAndre Hopkins looking like a stud, just like we all know he is. 103 yards and a touchdown. Buda Baker, 1 interception. Patrick Peterson, interception. And Isaiah Simmons, the rookie. So just an amazing game for the Cardinals. What a thriller. Just what an entertaining game to watch. That was an amazing game, whether you're a Seahawks fan or a Cardinals fan, because Seahawks shouldn't be too sad. They're 5-1. Russ is going to bounce back, but just a great game overall. And what a thriller to watch.
Yep, very entertaining game. And then for our final game, Monday Night Football, the Rams and the Bears. So for the Rams, you know what they say, blue and gold, tell them dead and cold. Horns up, baby. They definitely made this Chicago team, especially the offense, look cold, freezing. Nick Foles, 2 picks, no touchdowns. The rushing game had 49 rushing yards. They were able to get the quarterback 4 times. Like I said, the 2 picks. I mean, yeah, it was just a great game all around for the Rams. Defensively, they were good. They held the Chicago to under 279 yards total, 279 total yards, which is great. Only 10 points. This is one of the best scoring defenses in the league in the Rams. They also are one of the best defenses to get into the quarterback and getting sacks. They obviously that rushing defense is great to this game. They're looking like a playoff team and potentially contender in that NFC West division, which is absolutely loaded. But yeah, it was just great. They made the Chicago team look not good at all. Maybe Chicago may be having some doubts about their team right now. They've got 2 tough games against the Saints and the Titans coming up. They could very well be 5-4 going into Week 10. But we'll see. But the Rams looked great. Now you're 5-2. You're well in a playoff spot right now by a half game, I believe. You've got a game against the Dolphins, which you should definitely win coming up, and then you go into your bye week most likely happy.
Okay, Tio, I had to talk to my mom. I'm doing the Bears. Yeah, Bears. The Bears.
Bow down.
Bears 5-2. People think the Bears are good, but they played. What did they play? The football team, the Giants, and the Falcons. Okay. The Bears, tough loss. The Bears are 5-2, but that is not great because the Bears did play 3 really easy teams in the Falcons, a football team, and the Giants. They did beat the Buccaneers, but that was just Tom Brady's fault. I think the Buccaneers are a much better team. But Nick Foles, 261 yards, 2 interceptions. Couldn't really get rushing either. Only 48 yards from David Montgomery. Just not a good game for the Bears at all. Bears fans got a little ahead of themselves, kind of hyped their team up a lot. I heard a lot saying that they were going to whoop the Rams, but there was no way, in my opinion, that they were going to beat the Rams. Rams are severely underrated, in my opinion, right now at this point in the season, but probably not going to be anymore because people are going to start respecting the 5-2 Rams. But a great game for the Rams, pretty bad game for the Bears.
That's going to wrap it up for this week's NFL Weekend Review. A very entertaining week in terms of we had some games come down the wire. Some very, very entertaining games. Browns and Bengals, Detroit, Atlanta, Carolina, New Orleans, Pittsburgh, Tennessee, Seattle, Arizona. Just a lot of games that were close and came down to the final couple of minutes. Week 7 was a great one this week, and I'm excited for week 8. We got some primetime matchups I think are a little bit lackluster in week 8, but you never know. But any NFL is entertaining. I'm just so glad that we have football still, and we will see you in our next week's NFL Weekend Review. See ya.